Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Mark Wesley thought he'd found his perfect escape, a peaceful home in Pine Creek, free from chaos and surrounded by nature. But when his electricity bills skyrocketed and he uncovered a mysterious cable leading to his neighbor's workshop, Mark's tranquil life turned into a battle for justice he never saw coming. Mark Wesley had always dreamed of living in a quiet, serene neighborhood where the hum of traffic was replaced by the rustle of trees and the occasional bird call. After years of saving, he finally found his ideal home on the outskirts of Pine Creek, a peaceful community nestled in the heart of North Carolina. His modest single-story house was surrounded by a spacious yard, perfect for his energetic Labrador, Rex, to roam. The property bordered a patch of woodland, offering privacy and a sense of seclusion. Mark cherished the independence of Pine Creek. Unlike many suburban neighborhoods, there was no homeowners association, HOA, to dictate the color of his mailbox or the height of his grass. The residents respected each other's boundaries and enjoyed the freedom to manage their properties as they pleased. Among his neighbors was Garth Miller, a middle-aged craftsman who lived just a few lots down. Garth's expansive property housed a workshop filled with high-end tools and machinery for his woodworking business. Known for crafting exquisite custom furniture, Garth was well regarded in the community. He often greeted Mark with a friendly wave as he worked in his shop, sawdust clinging to his flannel shirt. Though they weren't close friends, Mark had always considered Garth a trustworthy and industrious man. Life in Pine Creek was idyllic. Mark spent his days working remotely as a software engineer and his evenings enjoying leisurely walks with Rex along the winding neighborhood trails. He loved the rhythm of his new life until the first sign of trouble appeared. It started subtly, an increase in his electricity bill. Initially, Mark dismissed it as an oversight or the result of using his air conditioner more frequently during the summer. However, over the following months, the bills kept climbing, reaching inexplicable heights. By the time autumn rolled around, Mark's electric costs had doubled, and last month alone, the increase had exceeded 80%. Puzzled, Mark began examining his home for possible causes. He checked his appliances, replaced light bulbs, and even monitored his thermostat more closely, but nothing explained the surge. The mystery gnawed at him, and soon, his concern turned into determination to uncover the root of the problem. One crisp Saturday morning, Mark decided to inspect his outdoor electrical panel. With Rex trotting at his side, he walked to the side of the house where the panel was mounted. As he opened it, something immediately caught his eye. A thick black cable neatly secured to his main power line. The cable looked professionally installed, running through the conduit and disappearing into the trees toward Garth's property. Mark's stomach tightened as realization dawned. This wasn't some accidental wiring oversight. Someone had intentionally tapped into his electricity supply. He knelt by the panel, his hands trembling slightly as he traced the cable with his fingers. Whoever had done this was skilled. The work was clean, seamless, and deliberate. Mark pulled out his phone, taking multiple photos and a short video of the setup for documentation. His mind raced with questions. Who had done this? How long had it been going on? And why hadn't he noticed it earlier? Standing back up, Mark's gaze shifted toward Garth's property. From where he stood, he could just make out the edge of Garth's workshop roof, peeking through the trees. A gnawing suspicion crept in. Could it be Garth? Mark shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. Garth was a decent guy, or so he'd thought. But something didn't add up. The timing of the electricity spike aligned almost perfectly with the expansion of Garth's woodworking operations. New powerful equipment had been delivered months ago, and Mark had even heard the buzz of saws and sanders more frequently than before. Mark's focus sharpened. He decided to take action but knew he needed to be cautious. Simply confronting Garth without proof could lead to unnecessary conflict. Instead, Mark devised a plan. He would disconnect the cable and see what happened. As he stood by the panel, Mark took a deep breath. The peaceful life he had built in Pine Creek suddenly felt more fragile than he had imagined. Mark's hands were steady as he turned off the circuit, feeding the suspicious cable. He took a moment to recheck the connection and confirmed that his power supply to the unauthorized line was completely disabled. With his phone still recording, he panned the camera over the electrical panel, capturing the now disconnected cable and the clear evidence of tampering. Satisfied that he had documented enough, he closed the panel and stepped back. As he waited, Mark felt the tension rising. If his suspicions were correct, the person responsible, most likely Garth, would soon notice the outage and come looking for answers. Mark didn't have to wait long. Barely 5 minutes later, he heard hurried footsteps crunching on the gravel path leading to his front porch. Garth appeared, looking unusually disheveled. He was wearing his work overalls, stained with grease and sawdust, and his expression was a mix of confusion and mild irritation. "Hey, Mark," Garth began, his tone light but laced with unease. "Hope I'm not bothering you, but, have you noticed anything strange with the power? Mine just cut out completely." Mark's mind raced. Confronting Garth directly could escalate the situation prematurely. Instead, he decided to play along. "Yeah, actually," Mark replied, keeping his voice even. "My lights flickered earlier, and the power went out for a minute, but everything's back on now." Garth nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Weird. Must be something with the lines. It's probably nothing, but I'll check my end just to be sure." "Thanks, man." Mark watched as Garth walked back toward his property, occasionally glancing over his shoulder. Something about Garth's demeanor, his hurried steps, his quick shift to politeness, did little to dispel Mark's growing suspicion. Curious to see how Garth would react next, Mark grabbed a pair of binoculars and positioned himself near his living room window, where he had a clear view of Garth's workshop. The building was large, with a wide double door and several windows. Mark noticed Garth pacing back and forth outside, scratching his head, as if trying to piece together the source of the problem. A few minutes later, Garth disappeared behind the workshop, likely heading to check the cable. Mark's suspicions were confirmed when he saw Garth reappear moments later, visibly frustrated. He glanced toward Mark's house before walking back to his front door. The sound of Garth's knock echoed through Mark's house. When Mark opened the door, Garth looked more agitated than before. "Hey, Mark, I hate to bother you again, but, are you sure your power's been steady? Mine's still acting up, and I can't figure out what's going on." Mark hid his amusement behind a concerned expression. "That's odd," he said. "It did cut out earlier, but it's been fine ever since. Maybe there's an issue on your end. Could it be something with your workshop setup?" Garth frowned and shook his head. "I don't think so. I checked everything. It's weird, you know? My tools are all dead, and I've got orders to finish. This is going to ruin my whole schedule." "I hope it's nothing serious," Mark said, keeping his tone neutral. "If it helps, I'll keep an eye on my power. Let me know if you need anything." "Thanks," Garth muttered distractedly before heading back to his property. Mark returned to his window and watched as Garth went inside the workshop again. Feeling emboldened, Mark decided to reconnect the cable briefly. Within moments, he saw lights flicker on in the workshop. Garth's relief was visible as he began inspecting his tools. But just as quickly, Mark cut the power again. Garth's reaction was immediate. He stormed out of the workshop, his frustration now palpable. He stood in the yard, staring toward Mark's house as if contemplating his next move. Mark repeated the cycle a few more times, reconnecting and disconnecting the cable intermittently. Garth's increasingly frantic behavior was almost comical, but Mark knew this wasn't just a game. Finally, Mark left the cable disconnected for good. This time, Garth emerged from his workshop in a rage. He stomped toward Mark's house, his face red with anger. When he knocked, it wasn't polite. It was loud and insistent. Mark opened the door, feigning concern. "Garth, is everything okay?" "No, it's not okay," Garth snapped. "The power keeps cutting in and out, and now it's completely dead. I don't know what's going on, but this is killing me. I've got deadlines, Mark. I can't afford this." Mark crossed his arms, pretending to think. "You know, I've noticed some strange flickering, but it seems fine now. Maybe you should check your breaker box again. It might be something on your property." Garth groaned, visibly exasperated. "I've checked it twice already, but I'll check it again. Thanks, I guess." As Garth trudged back toward his workshop, Mark's face hardened. Garth's growing desperation only confirmed what Mark had feared all along. His seemingly friendly neighbor had been stealing electricity from him for months. Mark decided it was time to escalate things further, but on his terms. With his suspicions confirmed, he grabbed his phone to call his lawyer. It was time to take this conflict into a different arena. Mark sat in his living room, phone in hand, as his lawyer laid out the next steps. "Document everything," the lawyer advised. "Photos, videos, any interactions you have with him. If he escalates, call the police immediately. The evidence you collect will be crucial if we take this to court. Mark nodded, his resolve strengthening. He installed an extra camera to monitor the electrical panel and another pointed at his property line near Garth's workshop. With everything set, Mark waited, knowing it was only a matter of time before Garth made another move. Later that evening, Mark was jolted out of his thoughts by the sound of crunching gravel. Peering through the window, he saw Garth's unmistakable silhouette sneaking toward his electrical panel. Mark grabbed his phone, discreetly started recording, and stepped outside. "Garth," Mark called out, his voice steady but firm. "What do you think you're doing?" Garth froze, his hand still on the panel, then turned slowly, his expression caught between guilt and defiance. "Mark, I need my power back. You've been messing with it all day, haven't you?" "Messing with it?" Mark's tone hardened. "You mean the power you've been stealing from me? I've documented the cable, your tampering, and the theft. Care to explain yourself before I call the police?" Garth's face turned red, and his voice rose. "Stealing? Are you serious? I didn't steal anything. I had to do this because I can't afford the electric bills for my workshop right now. You don't understand how tight things have been for me." Mark crossed his arms, unimpressed. "So you thought the solution was to steal from your neighbor instead of asking for help? That's not just unethical, Garth, it's illegal." Garth took a step closer, his expression darkening. "Look, I didn't have a choice. I have orders to fill, and I'm already behind. If I lose these clients, I lose everything. I'll pay you back. Just reconnect the cable and we'll call it even." Mark held his ground, his voice calm but unyielding. "The answer is no, Garth. You've crossed the line and I'm done playing games. Get off my property." But Garth wasn't ready to back down. "If you don't turn that power back on," he growled, "I'll make sure you regret it. You think you're better than me? You're just some stuck-up tech guy who doesn't understand what it's like to work with your hands. I've built my life from the ground up," Mark's patience snapped, "and you've built it by stealing from me. I don't care about your excuses. You have no right to touch my property or my electricity." Garth's anger boiled over. "Fine. If you're going to ruin me, I'll ruin you first." He pointed a finger at Mark, his tone laced with threat. "If you think this is over, you're dead wrong." Realizing the situation had become dangerous, Mark took a step back and dialed 911. "Garth, you need to leave. Now the police are on their way." "You're seriously calling the cops?" Garth sneered. "Go ahead. They'll take their sweet time getting here, and by then." He gestured toward Mark's house menacingly, but left the threat unfinished. Mark stood firm, his phone still in his hand. "Try me." As the distant wail of sirens reached their ears, Garth's bravado faltered. He backed away, his fists clenched and face twisted in fury. "This isn't over," he spat before retreating toward his workshop. Minutes later, the police arrived. Mark provided them with the evidence he had gathered, photos, videos, and the recordings of Garth's threats. The officers inspected the electrical panel and confirmed the tampering. They approached Garth's property and returned shortly with him in handcuffs. Mark watched as Garth was led away, still muttering angrily under his breath. The sight brought little satisfaction. Instead, Mark felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. This confrontation might be over, but the battle was far from finished. He knew he'd need to see this through to protect himself and hold Garth accountable. With the tension finally easing, Mark turned toward his house. It was time to prepare for the next stage, one that would play out in court. The next morning, Mark met with his lawyer to discuss the incident and the evidence he had collected. The police report, photos, videos, and recordings painted a clear picture of Garth's illegal actions. The lawyer assured Mark that they had a strong case for both criminal charges and civil compensation. "I'll file charges for theft, property tampering, and criminal trespass," the lawyer explained. "We'll also pursue damages for the increased electricity costs and the stress this has caused you." Garth's actions weren't just illegal, they were deliberate and malicious. As the legal process began, Mark learned more about the extent of Garth's theft. Garth had stopped paying for his workshop's electricity 6 months earlier, precisely when Mark's bills had begun to climb. Calculations showed that Garth's equipment had consumed enough electricity to cost Mark thousands of dollars in additional charges. Garth, now out on bail, remained on edge. He avoided contact with Mark, but sent him a letter through his attorney, proposing a private settlement. "Let's put this behind us," the letter read. "I'll pay back what I owe in exchange for dropping the charges." Mark was torn. He had once seen Garth as a decent neighbor, and part of him wanted to avoid dragging this out. But the memory of Garth's threats and his brazen behavior at the electrical panel cemented Mark's decision. "No deals," he told his lawyer. "This needs to go through the courts." The case gained traction quickly. Garth's tampering, threats, and repeated trespasses left little room for doubt. With mounting evidence and the support of the community, Mark felt a sense of justice taking shape. Yet he knew this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. Weeks passed, and Mark began to feel some semblance of normalcy returning. Garth had kept his distance since his arrest, and the legal case was moving steadily forward. Mark had installed a robust security system around his property, including cameras covering every critical area, from his electrical panel to the edges of his yard. He hoped the extra precautions would be enough to deter any further escalation. But one quiet night, Mark was violently pulled from sleep by the shrill sound of his security alarm. Groggy and disoriented, he stumbled to his window and froze at the sight before him. His detached garage containing his tools and his car was engulfed in flames. Bright orange tongues of fire licked at the sky, and thick smoke billowed into the air. Mark grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his voice shaking as he reported the fire. He ran outside, but the heat from the inferno forced him to keep his distance. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the glow and the smell of burning wood. The fire department arrived within minutes, but by the time they extinguished the blaze, the garage and everything inside it was a smoldering ruin. As Mark stood among the crowd, his mind raced with questions. Who could have done this? The answer came when he reviewed the footage from his security cameras. The video revealed a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask pushing a flaming trash can up to the garage door before quickly retreating into the shadows. The person's build and movements were eerily familiar. Mark handed the footage over to the police. It didn't take long for investigators to connect the arson to Garth. The police compared the video to earlier recordings of Garth on Mark's property, noting the similarities in height, gait, and body language. It was damning evidence, and it left no doubt about Garth's culpability. The next day, Mark's lawyer called with updates. "This changes everything," she said firmly. "Arson is a serious felony. With the video evidence, we can push for significant compensation and a much harsher sentence." Mark felt a surge of anger and resolve. Any hesitation he'd felt about pursuing the case was gone. Garth had gone too far. It wasn't just about stolen electricity or empty threats anymore. His neighbor had escalated to outright violence, endangering Mark's life and property. As the legal process intensified, the community rallied around Mark. Neighbors offered their support, helping to clear the charred remains of his garage and sharing their disgust at Garth's actions. The police filed additional charges against Garth, including arson, endangerment, and vandalism. Though Mark's home felt tainted by the attack, he refused to be driven out. He fortified his resolve to see the case through, no matter how long it took. Garth's latest act had sealed his fate, and Mark was determined to ensure justice would be served. Months later, Mark sat in the courthouse, his lawyer at his side, as the judge delivered the verdict. Garth was found guilty on multiple counts, including theft, criminal trespass, arson, and endangerment. The court ordered him to pay $700,000 in damages to Mark, a sum that included compensation for the stolen electricity, the destroyed garage, and emotional distress. In addition, Garth was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a fitting punishment for the chaos and danger he had caused. The judgment marked the end of a long and grueling ordeal for Mark. With the settlement money, he was able to rebuild his garage and upgrade his home security even further, ensuring no one could invade his property again. He also donated a portion of the funds to a local community safety initiative, helping neighbors install their own security systems and educate residents about protecting their homes. Pine Creek underwent a transformation as well. Garth's property, including his workshop, was sold at auction to cover the damages. The new owners, a young family, brought fresh energy to the neighborhood, and their kindness helped restore the sense of community that had been fractured by Garth's actions. For Mark, life slowly returned to normal. He spent weekends restoring what had been lost, planting a small garden where the garage had once stood, and repairing the minor damages caused during the incident. Each step felt like reclaiming his peace and independence. Despite the relief of the verdict, Mark couldn't shake the lingering disbelief that Garth, once a friendly neighbor, had stooped to such extremes. The memory of that night, the raging fire, the threat to his safety, served as a reminder of how quickly trust could be shattered. Yet, he refused to let fear dictate his life. Mark's resilience became a source of inspiration for his neighbors. The story of his fight against injustice spread throughout Pine Creek, and many residents began to see him as a figure of strength and perseverance. Mark even hosted a community barbecue to thank everyone who had supported him, using it as an opportunity to rebuild connections and foster goodwill. Looking back, Mark saw the ordeal as a painful but valuable lesson. He had learned the importance of vigilance, standing up for what was right, and protecting what was his. Sometimes, he reflected, you don't realize how strong you are until someone tries to take everything from you. One quiet evening, Mark sat on his porch with Rex at his feet, watching the sunset over the rebuilt garage. The sky burned with hues of orange and pink, a peaceful contrast to the flames that had once threatened his home. Raising a glass of iced tea, he toasted silently to his hard-fought victory and the return of calm to Pine Creek. As he patted Rex's head, Mark smiled and said aloud, "No more surprises, buddy. We've earned this peace." In the gentle rustle of the trees and the steady hum of crickets, the quiet promise of better days ahead settled over Mark's home, a testament to resilience, justice, and the strength to rebuild.